in the marble halls of Alexandria, where sunlight danced across alabaster columns and ceiling murals showed gods embracing pharaohs. A little girl learned a brutal truth: survival didn't come from love. It came from accepting the unthinkable. Her name was Arseno, and this isn't some ancient Egyptian fairy tale. This is real, raw, terrifying, and almost erased from history. When Alexander the Great died in 323 BC, the known world collapsed into chaos. His empire, stretching from Greece to India, shattered like glass on stone. His once loyal generals turned on each other with a fury that stunned even their own time. One of them, a man named Ptolemy, seized Egypt. Smart, ruthless, calculating. He didn't just take land. He created something far more dangerous: a dynasty where family ties were tools, where blood was currency, and where morality could be redefined if it kept the throne intact. That's the world Arseno was born into. She wasn't raised to be loved. She was raised to be useful. From the time she could speak, she was groomed for a role, not as a daughter, but as a political weapon. Her body wasn't hers. Her future wasn't hers. Even her thoughts were shaped to serve something greater than herself: the dynasty. In most cultures, a father is a protector. In Alexandria, a father could be a predator. Ancient records don't shout this part of the story. They whisper. But the whispers are enough. They suggest Arseno was prepared for queenship by her father Ptolemy I in a way that broke all Greek customs and every moral boundary. He didn't just raise her. He took her. Now in Egypt, pharaohs marrying daughters wasn't unheard of. It was wrapped in myth, in divine symbolism. Isis marrying her brother Osiris and so on. But for Arseno, it wasn't mythology. It was her body, her childhood, her reality, and it shattered her. But instead of breaking, she adapted. They say royal blood is sacred, but in the palace of Alexandria, royal blood was a weapon, and children were born to be used. Arseno didn't die. She didn't disappear. She didn't fade into silence like so many abused daughters across history. No, she did something far more dangerous. She learned. She learned how to smile during feasts where priests chanted praises to the man who stole her innocence. She learned how to nod along while being compared to Isis, the goddess, wife, sister, mother, used as justification for what should never have been justified. But most of all, she learned how to play their game better than they ever could. From pawn to player, by her early 20s, Arseno was married off to Lysimachus, an aging general who ruled Thrace. He was older than her father, scarred by decades of war, and saw his new wife as nothing more than a political bridge between Egypt and Greece. He underestimated her. In the cutthroat court of Thrace, where betrayal was a daily ritual and trust was a fairy tale, Arseno didn't just survive, she thrived. She learned the language. She memorized the gossip. She knew who feared Lysimachus, who envied his son Agathocles, and who would jump ship if the tide turned. Then she turned the tide. With whispers and subtle suggestions, she planted seeds of doubt, never loud, never direct, just enough to nudge the paranoid court into believing Agathocles was a threat. And eventually, he was executed for treason. Everyone knew who had pulled the strings. No one dared say it aloud. She didn't cry. She didn't gloat. She simply became the mother of the next heirs to the throne. When family becomes the enemy but power is never permanent. In 281 BC, Lysimachus fell in battle. Arseno was left alone, a widow with 3 young sons and no army to protect them. She fled to a city called Cassandreia, seeking refuge with her half-brother, Ptolemy Keranos. Yes, half-brother. Yes, she married him. On paper, it was a strategic move, a union to keep her children safe and claim back a piece of power. In reality, it was her greatest miscalculation. Ptolemy Keranos didn't want power shared. He wanted it all. One by one, he murdered her children. The eldest, accused of rebellion, was publicly executed. The second was poisoned during a banquet. The youngest, still learning to walk, simply vanished. No body, no explanation. And Arseno, she watched, she endured. She did not scream, did not beg, did not weep. She knew. If she broke character, she would be next. That was the moment whatever humanity she had left died. Returned to Egypt. As a different creature somehow, she escaped. Again. This time, she didn't return to Egypt as a lost queen. She came back as something new, a survivor so deeply reshaped by pain, betrayal, and strategy that she no longer believed in family, loyalty, or love, only leverage. Her younger brother, Ptolemy II, now sat on the throne. He was intelligent, artistic, and far too gentle to survive in the world she came from. And so, she did what no one expected. She convinced him to divorce his wife, then to marry her. Yes, again, brother and sister. Again, she cloaked it in mythology, Isis and Osiris, divine unions, royal purity, sacred lineage. But this time, she wasn't just surviving the system, she was becoming it. As queen, not just by name but in power, Arseno didn't just hold influence, she wielded control, and the world would never be the same again. He who controls religion controls truth, and she who defines morality controls history. Arseno didn't return to Egypt seeking shelter. She came back to take over. She was no longer the little girl forced into silence, no longer the mother who watched her children die, no longer the political bride or pawn. This time, she was the architect. A wedding against nature, the marriage between Arseno and her younger brother, Ptolemy Siu, wasn't just shocking. It was a calculated declaration of a new world order. To the Greeks, it was grotesque. To the old guard of Alexandria, it was heresy. But to the high priests of Egypt, whose salaries and status depended on royal favor, it was a divine necessity. They dusted off myths, twisted theology, and reframed incest as sacred. They said Isis had married her brother. They claimed the union would bless Egypt with divine harmony and eternal power. They told the people this is not a perversion. This is perfection. And they meant it, because now, questioning the royal marriage didn't just mean political dissent. It meant blasphemy. If from consort to commander, unlike most queens, Arseno didn't stay in the background. She wasn't there to decorate ceremonies or birth heirs. She was in the war rooms, at the negotiating tables, signing edicts, removing enemies, reshaping Egypt from the inside out. One by one, she erased the past. Ptolemy's previous wife, Arseno I, was exiled. Her children were stripped of their royal status. Her allies were charged with treason. Their lands seized, their names erased from state records. Anyone who had once questioned Arseno's authority gone. But she didn't stop at revenge. She reprogrammed the system. Weaponizing rituals, Arseno understood something most rulers forget. Fear can make people obey, but belief makes them worship. So she created rituals. Every noble was now required to bow before the divine sibling union, a ritual that glorified her marriage as a gift from the gods. Every year, lords and generals pledged loyalty not just to the throne, but to the sanctity of royal incest. One official refused to bring his wife to the ceremony. He was executed. The charge: offending sacred blood. Schools began teaching children that sibling marriage was a blessing. Poets were paid to praise the eternal love of brother and sister. Murals showed Arseno and Ptolemy being crowned by Horus himself. Within a generation, what was once taboo became tradition. And tradition, once hardened into faith, becomes unbreakable. A war is distraction. While Egypt transformed under her grip, Arseno turned her eyes outward. She pushed Ptolemy II into the First Syrian War, a conflict with the Eastern Seleucid Empire. Why? For power, for vengeance, but also to distract the public while she solidified her hold at home. The war brought temporary gains and permanent costs. Taxes doubled. Villagers were conscripted into armies or forced into labor. Farmlands were drained to feed soldiers and build temples, glorifying the royal couple. The empire grew richer. The people grew poorer. But to Arseno, that was irrelevant. She wasn't here to be loved. She was here to win. Trauma as a system of government. And here lies the heart of it all. Arseno didn't just adapt to pain. She turned it into policy. Her father violated her. She turned incest into law. Her husbands betrayed her gear. She outlawed love and trust. Her sons were murdered, but she taught herself to feel nothing. What didn't kill her made her crueler. What broke her made her sharper. The only way she could survive was to become what hurt her, and then make everyone else live by those same rules. She didn't just escape her trauma. She exported it, and Egypt paid the price. When Arseno I died around 270 BC, there were no epic songs, no mythic farewell, just a cold, formal line in the royal record. She was buried with full honors, like a goddess. But death didn't end her influence. She didn't vanish. She calcified into law. She became tradition. She became a blueprint that generations of rulers would follow, or else fall. She began life as a victim of abuse. She died as a system. And what she left behind would rot her dynasty from within. The family that married itself, every Ptolemaic ruler after her followed the mold. Brothers married sisters. Mothers married sons. Nephews married aunts. Why? Because Arseno had made it sacred. She made incest not only acceptable, but required for kingship. Her marriage to Ptolemy II was the divine prototype, the foundation myth of Ptolemaic legitimacy. And if your bloodline wasn't pure enough, If you married outside the family, you were seen as politically weak, even impure. But here's what they didn't understand. Blood purity is poison. The empire rotting from within modern science tells us what the ancients didn't know. Incest causes genetic collapse. But the symptoms were everywhere. One king who whispered to statues and claimed they spoke back. A prince who slit his own tendons because the gods told him to. A queen who burned 50 servants alive because they looked at her too long. All were descendants of Arseno. The historian Plutarch would later write, the house of Ptolemy did not fall by sword, it fell by its own reflection. And he was right. The dynasty didn't crumble from invasion, it melted from inside, eroded by madness, mistrust, and sacred incest turned tradition. The moral order turned upside down. If genetic decay was the body dying, moral decay was the soul fading. Arseno didn't just change politics. She reprogrammed ethics. Incest became sacred. Killing your own children became strategic. Erasing the memory of your predecessor became smart policy. And once that system was in place, backed by priests, taught in schools, carved in temple walls, no one questioned it. Not because they believed it was good, because they couldn't imagine a world where it wasn't. From Arseno to Cleopatra, the final tragedy, Cleopatra VA, the final ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty, is remembered as a tragic heroine. But few mention that she was the end product of 300 years of royal inbreeding. She was the child of brother, sister marriage. She married 2 of her younger brothers in turn. She ruled an empire built on tradition and trapped by it. She didn't invent the curse. She inherited it. When Rome finally arrived and Cleopatra took her own life, it wasn't just the end of a person. It was the conclusion of a cycle Arseno had started. The fall of Egypt didn't begin at Cleopatra's feet. It began with a little girl in a palace, learning how to survive by becoming what hurt her. A warning to every civilization, Arseno Sue was not simple. She was a child abused by her father, a mother betrayed by husbands and fate, a queen who refused to be broken, a ruler who rebuilt her world in her image, wounded, brilliant, and brutal. And the most terrifying part, she succeeded. No one stopped her. No one could. She became the moral compass of an empire and then turned it south. When trauma sits on the throne, pain becomes law. And when pain becomes law, civilization eats itself. And Egypt did. A wounded individual can either heal or they can rule. And when they choose power over healing, the world must prepare to live inside their pain. That's what happened with Arseno II and with an entire civilization under her. Some historians call the Ptolemaic era a golden age, the last bright chapter before Rome swallowed the East. But look closer. That golden glow? It was painted over bone, polished with blood. It shimmered with cruelty dressed up as order. Power masquerading as peace. It looked like a dynasty, but it felt like a cage. This isn't just about incest. You might think this story is about incest, about strange rituals, about a decadent empire doomed by taboo. It's deeper than that. This is a story about how trauma, if left unchecked, becomes a governing philosophy. How a wounded mind, given power, can reshape morality to protect itself. A father abuses his daughter, so she turns incest into sacred law. Husbands betray her ghee, so she outlaws emotional attachment. Her children are murdered, so she crushes any form of tenderness. She's afraid peace, so she creates rituals that outlaw dissent. Arseno didn't just escape her trauma. She weaponized it, and then she made everyone else live by it. That's not survival. That's empire. The modern mirror sound familiar? When a society uses tradition to justify injustice, when a government invokes family values to exclude and control, when a damaged leader builds an entire system to mirror their pain, you don't have to look at ancient Egypt. You can see it in modern politics, in cultural wars, in institutions built to reflect the fears of their founders. This isn't just a history lesson. It's a warning. If you allow the most damaged voices to write the rules without accountability, don't be surprised when the rules begin to look like trauma dressed in ceremony. Why this story matters now? Because America, like any powerful nation, is a balancing act between freedom and control, between heritage and progress, between old pain and new hope. Arseno II is a case study in what happens when the wrong person becomes the blueprint. She was brilliant, strategic, emotionally untouchable. She rose higher than anyone expected, and in doing so, she burned the soul out of her empire. She proved you can win every game and still lose your civilization. because power that comes from pain doesn't fix anything. It just spreads the pain. Who gets to rewrite the legacy? Here's the strange thing about history, it never really ends. Each generation rewrites it in its own image. Arseno was once worshipped, then condemned, then forgotten, then rediscovered as a feminist icon, then debated as a villain. Maybe she's all of those things, but one thing never changes the lesson. Build a society where trauma is sacred, where morality is rewritten to justify survival tactics. And you're not building a nation, you're building a reflection chamber for pain. And pain, when institutionalized, doesn't fade. It breeds. Arseno. Victim, survivor, queen architect of collapse. Picture it. A little girl raised in marble corridors dreaming of safety, violated by the very man meant to protect her. A teenager, forced into a political marriage, learning to weaponize smiles and bury her grief. A mother watching her children die, learning that love is a weakness. A woman, returning home, not to find healing, but to make the world fit her pain. She didn't just survive. She reshaped a civilization in her own image. And that image endured, until it crumbled under its own contradictions. The question is, if someone like her rose today, would we even recognize it? Would we see the policies? Or the pain behind them? Would we hear the sermons? Or notice the scars? Or would we follow, because the rituals feel sacred, even if they're built from rot? Cielos in Chichu HT Arseno Sio isn't just a forgotten queen. She's the beginning of a pattern where unhealed pain left in the wrong hands becomes law, where morality is not erased, but reversed, where the most dangerous thing a society can do is mistake trauma for wisdom. Cleopatra may have been the final act, but Arseno, she was the first question. And history, our history, doesn't forgive foundations built on wounds. It just waits to repeat them.